The emergency broadcast center on Kythera Prime hummed with desperate activity. Ambassador Veltar pressed her webbed hands against the communication console, her blue skin pale with fear. Around her, technicians worked frantically to boost the signal strength. The air tasted of salt and panic. "Boost the power to maximum," Veltar ordered, her voice shaking. "This message must reach every corner of known space." Tech specialist Noru looked up from his station, his large eyes reflecting worry. "Ambassador, we're already using emergency power reserves. If we push harder, we might damage the transmitter." "Then we damage it," Veltar replied firmly. If this doesn't work, there won't be anyone left to use it anyway." Outside the communication center, the beautiful crystal cities of Kythera Prime burned under alien fire. The grim horde had arrived 3 days ago, and their massive ships now blocked out the sun. Their weapons turned proud buildings into smoking ruins. Millions of Kytherians hid in underground shelters, listening to the sounds of destruction above. Veltar activated the recording system and began her message. "This is Ambassador Veltar of the Kytherian Coalition, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. We are under attack by the Grim Horde. Our defensive fleets have been destroyed. Our shield generators are failing. Billions of innocent lives hang in the balance." She paused, looking at the tactical display that showed 14 coalition worlds. Under siege. Red warning lights blinked across the star map like dying heartbeats. Each light represented a world where her people were fighting and dying. "We have heard stories," she continued. "Stories of a species from a world called Earth. They call themselves humans, and others call them Deathworlders. We know your reputation for warfare. We know you are feared across the galaxy. But we also know you protect the innocent." The building shook as another grim bombardment struck nearby. Dust fell from the ceiling, and several technicians cried out in fear. But Veltar kept recording. "Please," she whispered into the transmitter, "help us survive. Help us save our children. We cannot offer you riches or territory. We can only offer our eternal gratitude. But perhaps that is enough for a species with honor." She ended the transmission and looked at Noru. "Send it out. Maximum broadcast power. Every frequency, every channel, every relay station still working." Far across the galaxy, in the cold depths of space near Jupiter, Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Terran Defense Station Olympus. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars from old battles. His eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen both the best and worst of war. "Sir," called Lieutenant Ross from the communications station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Kytherian sector. It's on all emergency frequencies." Kane frowned. The Kytherian Coalition was a peaceful alliance of aquatic species, thousands of light years away. They had no contact with human space. "Put it through, Lieutenant." The bridge crew listened in silence as Veltara's desperate message played. Kane watched the tactical data that came with the transmission. 14 worlds, billions of civilians, an enemy that had crushed their entire defensive fleet. "Sir," Ross said quietly, "long-range sensors confirm the data. The Grim Horde is real. They've been moving through that sector for weeks, destroying everything in their path." Kane studied the star charts. The Grim Horde was a name whispered in fear across the galaxy. They were nomadic warriors who consumed entire worlds before. Moving on, no one had ever successfully stopped them. "What do we know about this Grim Horde?" Kane asked. Commander Davis, his intelligence officer, pulled up files on his tablet. "Savage warriors, sir. They've been terrorizing the outer galaxies for centuries. Their ships are massive and heavily armed. They take no prisoners and leave. No survivors. Most species simply run when they hear the Grim are coming." Kane looked at the message again. The Kytherians were asking humans for help, knowing their reputation as Deathworlders. It meant they were truly desperate. No species contacted humans unless they had no other choice. "Sir," Ross said carefully, "what are your orders?" Kane was quiet for a long moment. He thought about the billions of innocent people hiding in shelters while their worlds burned. He thought about the Grim Horde, who believed they were unstoppable. He thought about what it meant to be human. Open a channel to all fleet commands, Kane said finally. Priority Alpha. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Priority Alpha was reserved for full-scale war mobilization. It hadn't been used in 50 years. Channel open, sir, Ross reported. Kane straightened his uniform and looked directly into the camera. This is Admiral Kane, Terran Defense Command. By emergency authorization, I am implementing Protocol 7. All fleet elements are to report to Rally Point Sigma immediately. This is not a drill. We are going to war. He paused, then continued. Send word to every fleet commander, every colony, every outpost. Tell them innocent people are dying and the galaxy's bullies think no one can stop them. We're about to prove them wrong. As the message went out across human space, Kane turned back to the tactical display. He began calculating jump routes and fleet positions. This would be the largest human military operation in history. Lieutenant Ross, he said calmly, prepare a response to the Catherian coalition. Tell them help is coming. Tell them Earth remembers what it means to stand against the darkness. Back on Kythera Prime, Valtar waited by the communication console. Hours had passed since her desperate message. The bombardment continued outside, and reports came in of other coalition worlds falling to the grim advance. Ambassador Noru called out suddenly, "We're receiving a transmission. It's from human space." Valtara's heart raced as she listened to the short message. It was simple and direct. Message received. Help is coming. Hold on. She closed her eyes and felt hope for the first time in days. She had called for aid from the legendary Deathworlders. Now she could only wait and see what her desperate plea had awakened. Above them, the grim horde continued their destruction, unaware that they had just made the worst mistake in their violent history. They had threatened the innocent within. Range of Earth's protection. War was coming. The message from Admiral Kane spread across human space like wildfire. Within hours, every military base, space station, and colony had received the call to arms. Protocol 7 had not been activated in 50 years, and its implementation sent shockwaves through the entire Terran military structure. On the bridge of the battleship Thunderbolt, Fleet Admiral Torres read the message twice before believing it. She had been patrolling the Outer Rim territories, hunting pirates and protecting trade routes. Her fleet of 60 ships was the first line of defense against external threats. Navigation, plot a course for Rally Point Sigma, Torres ordered. Her crew, maximum speed. Her first officer, Commander Walsh, looked concerned. Admiral, that will leave the entire Outer Rim undefended. What if pirates take advantage? Torres smiled grimly. Commander, where we're going, pirates will be the least of anyone's worries. Besides, something tells me the Outer Rim is about to become very quiet when word spreads about what humans do to the species that threaten innocent civilians. Near the Centauri system, Captain Blake received the same message aboard his carrier group. He commanded 12 ships, including the massive carrier Enterprise. His pilots were among the best in human space, trained for deep space combat missions. All squadrons, prepare for immediate departure, Blake announced over the ship's communication system. We're going to show the galaxy what happens when someone picks on people who can't fight back. Lieutenant Commander Frost, his chief pilot, grinned as she checked her fighter's weapons systems. Sir, the pilots are asking if this is finally the real thing. Tell them it's more real than anything they've trained for, Blake replied. And tell them to make sure their fighters are loaded with the good ammunition. We're not going to a parade. On Mars, General Vance stood in the command center of the Planetary Marine Corps' headquarters. The Red Planet had been humanity's military training ground for 2 centuries. Its harsh environment produced the toughest soldiers in known space. How many Marines can we deploy? Vance asked his staff. Colonel Murphy checked his tablet. 200,000, sir. Full battle gear. Transport ships can be ready in 18 hours, Vance nodded. Make it 12 hours and contact the reserve units. Every Marine who can hold a rifle is going on this mission. The industrial worlds responded just as quickly. On New Geneva, factory complexes that normally produce civilian goods switched to military production. weapons, ammunition, medical supplies, and ship parts began rolling off assembly lines at maximum capacity. Manager Roberts watched the production numbers climb on his screens. Double all shifts, he told his supervisors. The boys out there are going to need everything we can make. And make sure the quality is perfect. No Marine dies because we rushed a job. On Titan, the massive shipyards that orbited Saturn began emergency modifications to civilian vessels. Cargo haulers received armor plating and weapon mounts. Mining ships were fitted with military-grade shields and long-range sensors. Foreman Jackson supervised the conversion of a bulk freighter into a troop transport. I know it's not pretty, he told his crew, but this ship is going to carry Marines to war. Make sure she can protect them. But the most surprising response came from the civilian population. Across human space, merchant captains, freight operators, and independent traders began volunteering their ships for military service. Captain Morrison had spent 30 years hauling cargo between Earth and the outer colonies. His ship Wanderer was old but reliable. When he heard about the Catherian plea for help, he didn't hesitate. Control, this is Captain Morrison of the merchant vessel Wanderer, he transmitted to the nearest military base, requesting permission to join the relief fleet. My ship may not be much, but she's got engines that work and cargo bays that can carry supplies. Similar calls came from hundreds of civilian captains. They knew the risks of joining a military operation, but they also knew what it meant to be human. When innocent people called for help, humans answered. Even more shocking was the response from the outer colonies. Settlements that had fought for independence from Earth's government suddenly offered their full support. The colony of New Texas sent its entire militia fleet. The mining stations of the asteroid belt contributed their fast patrol ships. Governor Mitchell of New Texas explained it simply. We may not always agree with Earth's politics, but we're all human, and humans protect people who can't protect themselves. The most mysterious response came from the edges of human space. Ships began appearing that didn't exist on any official registry. They bore no markings and answered no calls for identification. These were the Ghost Fleet, humanity's secret black operations units. Commander Reese led the Ghost Fleet from the stealth ship Shadow. His ships were equipped with experimental weapons and cloaking technology. They operated in the dark spaces, between stars, handling threats that officially didn't exist. All Ghost units converge on Rally Point Sigma, Reese transmitted on encrypted channels. The children are in danger. Time to show the galaxy why monsters fear the dark. As ships from across human space began converging on the rally point, long-range sensors started detecting the massive scale of the response. What had started as a desperate call for help was becoming the largest military mobilization in human history on Luna Base. Admiral Kane watched the tactical displays with growing amazement. The numbers kept climbing. Warships, support vessels, civilian conversions, and mysterious unmarked ships all heading toward the same destination. Sir, Lieutenant Ross reported, his voice filled with awe, current count is approaching 8,000 vessels. And more are still arriving. Kane nodded slowly. He had expected a strong response, but this exceeded even his most optimistic projections. Every branch of the military, every civilian organization, and apparently every secret organization was joining the effort. Lieutenant, Kane said, open a channel to the Catherian Coalition. It's time to let them know what they've awakened. Beck. On Kythera Prime, Ambassador Veltar sat in the underground command center. The bombardment above had intensified, and reports from other Coalition worlds grew worse by the hour. 3 planets had already fallen completely to the grim horde. Ambassador, tech specialist Noru called out suddenly, we're receiving another transmission from human space. Veltar listened to the short message with growing wonder. The humans weren't just sending help. They were sending everything they had. How many ships did they say? She asked, uncertain she had heard correctly. Over 8,000, Ambassador, and still growing. Veltar stared at the number in disbelief. The entire Catherian defensive fleet had numbered less than 300 ships. The humans were bringing a force larger than most species' entire navies. What have we done? She whispered to herself. What kind of sleeping giant have we awakened? Above them, the grim horde continued their assault, unaware that across the galaxy humanity was mobilizing for war. The Deathworlders were coming, and they were bringing everything they had. The edge of the Cytherian system rippled with energy as reality itself seemed to tear open. One by one, massive shapes emerged from hyperspace jumps, their hulls gleaming under the distant star's light. The human fleet had arrived. Warlord Krex stood on the bridge of his flagship Bloodfang, staring at the tactical display with growing confusion. His red eyes, adapted for hunting in the dark, struggled to process what the sensors were telling him. Ships, hundreds of them. No, thousands. Tactical Officer Brutus, Krex growled in his harsh voice, explain these readings. How many vessels are we detecting? Brutus, a scarred veteran of countless raids, checked his instruments 3 times before answering. Warlord, initial count shows 2,000 vessels. But sir, more are still arriving. Krex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 2,000? Impossible. No species in this galaxy has that many warships. Check your sensors again. But even as he spoke, more ships continued to emerge from hyperspace. The human fleet spread out across the system's edge like a metallic constellation. Massive dreadnoughts, the size of space stations. Sleek destroyers that moved with predatory grace. Carrier groups launching clouds of fighter craft that swarmed through space like angry insects. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of his flagship Sovereign, watching the deployment with professional satisfaction. Every ship took its assigned position. With clockwork precision, the formations were perfect, the spacing exact. This was the result of centuries of military doctrine and the discipline that came from being born on a world where everything tried to kill you. Admiral, reported Commander Hayes from the communications station, all fleet elements have arrived and are in position. Final count, 8,216 vessels. Kane nodded. It was the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. But looking at the burning Cytherian worlds on his tactical display, he knew they would need every ship. Send a signal to the Cytherian coalition, Kane ordered. Tell them the cavalry has arrived. On Kythera Prime, Ambassador Veltar felt the ground shake as another grim bombardment struck the capital city. But for the first time in days, she was smiling. Her long-range sensors were detecting something impossible. Noru, she called to her aide, confirm these readings. How many human ships are out there? Tech specialist Noru checked his instruments repeatedly, his hands shaking with excitement. Ambassador, sensors show over 8,000 vessels. The humans ... they brought everything they have. Veltar watched the tactical display, seeing the human fleet arranging itself in perfect formations around the system's outer edge. It was like watching the deployment of an ancient army of gods, each ship a weapon of unimaginable power. Broadcast a message to all coalition forces, she ordered. Tell them to take shelter and stay out of the humans' way. I think we're about to witness something the galaxy has never seen before. Aboard the grim flagship, Warlord Krex was no longer laughing. His tactical display showed red contacts spreading across half the star system. Ships of sizes and designs he had never encountered. The human fleet dwarfed his own forces by a ratio of 20-1. Sir, Brutus reported, his voice uncertain for the first time in decades. We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Put it through, Krex snarled. He would show these unknown aliens that the grim horde feared nothing. Admiral Kane's voice filled the bridge, calm and professional. This is Admiral Kane of the Terran Expeditionary Force, commanding the relief fleet sent to protect the Cytherian coalition. Grim horde vessels, you have 30 minutes to withdraw from Cytherian space or face total annihilation. Krex roared with laughter that echoed through his ship. 30 minutes? These humans think they can threaten the mighty grim horde? We have terrorized this galaxy for 1,000 years. But his laughter died when he looked at his sensor displays again. The human ships were moving with a precision that spoke of experience and discipline. Their formations were not random clusters like most species used, but carefully designed patterns that maximized firepower and protection. Captain Elena commanded the Destroyer Squadron Lightning Strike, 12 fast attack ships positioned on the fleet's right flank. She watched the grim vessels through her scope, noting their aggressive postures and outdated tactics. "All ships, this is Elena," she transmitted to her squadron. "Enemy vessels show typical raider mentalities. Overconfident, underorganized. Standard pack hunting protocols should be effective." Her first officer, Lieutenant Grant, checked the weapon systems. "Ma'am, all ships report ready for combat. Railguns charged, missile tubes loaded, point defense systems online." Elena smiled. Her squadron had trained for this exact scenario countless times. The Grim might be savage fighters, but they had never faced an enemy that understood the true nature of warfare. On the carrier Endeavour, Captain Rex prepared his fighter wings for deployment. 200 fighters sat in launch bays, their pilots running final checks on weapons and engines. These were not just attack craft, but precision instruments of war. "All pilots, this is Rex," he announced over the communications system. "Remember, your training, the enemy fights like wild animals. We fight like professionals. Show them the difference." Fighter pilot Commander Stone checked her missile loadouts one final time. "Sir, the pilots are asking about rules of engagement." Rex looked at the tactical display showing the burning Cytherian cities. "Tell them there are no innocent Grim ships. Everything out there is a legitimate target. Let's give them a demonstration of human fighter tactics." Back on the Grim flagship, Warlord Krex was beginning to feel something he hadn't experienced in centuries: doubt. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was organized in ways that suggested deep understanding of space warfare. Their ship movements showed coordination that spoke of a unified command structure. "How much time until the deadline?" he asked Brutus. 15 minutes, Warlord. Should we prepare for attack?" Krex studied the tactical display. His 400 ships against over 8,000 human vessels. But the Grim had never retreated from any battle. Their reputation was built on savage aggression and the fear it inspired. "Send a response to the humans," Krex ordered. "Tell them the Grim Horde retreats from no one. If they want a fight, they will get one." Admiral Kane received the Grim response and shook his head sadly. "They never learn," he said to Commander Hayes. "Open fleet communications." Across the human armada, thousands of captains and crew members listened as Kane's voice reached every ship. "All vessels, prepare for combat operations. The enemy has chosen to fight rather than withdraw. They believe their reputation for savagery makes them unstoppable." Kane paused, looking at the display showing coalition worlds under attack. "They're about to learn what happens when savages meet soldiers. All ships, weapons free. Show them what Earth taught us about warfare." The human fleet began moving forward with mechanical precision. Each ship knew its role, its target, its mission. They advanced not as a mob of individual raiders, but as a single, unified instrument of war. Warlord Krex watched the advance and felt his first real fear. The humans moved like predators, not prey. Their coordination suggested a level of military sophistication that the Grim had never encountered. "For the record, Warlord," Admiral Kane's final transmission reached the Grim flagship, "we didn't bring a fleet. We brought an extinction event." The battle began with a silence that felt like the universe holding its breath. Then Admiral Kane spoke one word into his communication system: "Execute." 8,000 human warships opened fire simultaneously, the void between the fleets lit up with deadly energy. Railgun rounds traveled at impossible speeds, their paths marked by brief flashes of superheated metal. Missile swarms launched from hundreds of ships, each projectile thinking for itself as it hunted for targets. Energy beams cut through space like swords made of light. Warlord Krex watched in growing horror as his front line simply ceased to exist. Grim battleships that had terrorized entire sectors for decades vanished in brilliant explosions. Their thick armor, designed to withstand conventional weapons, might as well have been paper against human technology. "What is this?" Krex roared. at his tactical officer. How are they destroying our ships so easily? Brutus stared at his displays, watching friendly contacts disappear faster than he could count them. Sir, their weapons, they're unlike anything we've seen. The projectiles are moving at nearly light speed. Our armor can't stop them. Captain Elena's destroyer squadron demonstrated the deadly precision of human pack tactics. Her 12 ships moved like a school of predatory fish, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously. They targeted grim vessels with surgical precision, their railguns punching through hulls with devastating effect. Target the heavy cruiser at coordinates 749, Elena ordered her squadron. All ships, concentrated fire. 12 rail. Guns spoke as one. The grim cruiser, a massive vessel that had destroyed countless worlds, broke apart under the combined assault. Debris scattered through space, marking another victory for human military doctrine. Lieutenant Grant monitored. The battle from Elena's bridge? Ma'am, enemy return fire is completely ineffective. Their energy weapons can't penetrate our shields, and their projectiles are too slow to hit us. Elena nodded. The Grim fought like barbarians, relying on brute force and intimidation. They had never faced an enemy that understood the science of warfare. Continue attack pattern Delta. Let's show them how real predators hunt. On the carrier Endeavor, Captain Rex watched his fighter wings tear through grim formations like a hurricane through a wheat field. Human fighters moved with impossible coordination, their pilots linked by advanced communication systems that let them think as one organism. This is Stone, reported his lead pilot. Enemy fighters are falling back. They can't match our speed or maneuverability. Their weapons can't lock onto us, Rex smiled grimly. Grim fighters relied on intimidation and ramming attacks. Human pilots were trained in three-dimensional combat, using advanced targeting systems and weapons that could think for themselves. Continue the attack. Don't let any of them escape to threaten civilian populations. Commander Stone led her squadron in a perfect attack formation, their fighters dancing through space in patterns that confused and overwhelmed the enemy. Her missiles found their targets with deadly accuracy, each one destroying a Grim fighter. With clinical efficiency aboard the Grim flagship, panic was spreading through the crew. Warriors who had never known fear were discovering what terror felt like. Their mighty fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that seemed to possess godlike powers. "Warlord," Brutus called out, his voice shaking, "we've lost 60% of our forces, the humans. They're not even taking damage. Their shields are absorbing everything we throw at them." Krex stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Red contacts representing his ships disappeared one after another, while the human fleet remained untouched. It was impossible. No species in the galaxy possessed such overwhelming military superiority. All ships concentrate fire on their largest vessels, Krex ordered desperately. Surely their flagship can be damaged. The remaining Grim ships focused their weapons on Admiral Kane's dreadnought Sovereign. Energy beams and projectiles converged on the massive human warship, creating a light show that could be seen across the system. Admiral Kane watched the attack calmly from his bridge. "Damage report," he requested. Commander Hayes checked his instruments. "No damage, sir. Their weapons can't penetrate our deflector screens. Shield strength is still at 98%. Kane nodded. Human shield technology was generations ahead of anything the Grim possessed. "Return fire, all weapons." The Sovereign's response was devastating. Its main guns, weapons designed to crack planets, fired once. The energy beam struck 3 Grim battleships simultaneously, vaporizing them instantly. Secondary weapons eliminated another dozen enemy vessels in the span of seconds. Across the human fleet, similar scenes played out. Advanced targeting computers identified enemy weak points with impossible precision. Weapon systems designed by a species that had survived on the deadliest world in the galaxy proved unstoppable against raiders who relied on fear rather than skill. Captain Blake commanded the battleship group Hammer of Justice, 6 massive vessels that served as the fleet's heavy assault units. His ships carried the largest weapons in the human arsenal, guns that could destroy space stations with single shots. "All ships, fire for effect," Blake ordered. "Let's end this quickly." The heavy weapons spoke with voices like thunder. Each shot eliminated multiple enemy vessels, their overwhelming power leaving nothing but expanding clouds of debris. The Grimm were learning that there was a vast difference between raiders and soldiers on Kythera Prime. Ambassador Veltar watched the battle through long-range sensors, unable to believe what she was seeing. The human fleet was destroying the Grimm horde with casual efficiency. Ships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were being eliminated like insects. "How is this possible?" she whispered to tech specialist Noru. "The humans are fighting an enemy twice their numbers, and they're not even struggling." Noru checked his readings again. "Ambassador, the human fleet hasn't lost a single ship. They're destroying Grimm vessels faster than our sensors can track. It's like watching predators hunt prey." The realization struck Veltar like a physical blow. She had called for help from the Deathworlders, expecting them to send a rescue force. Instead, she had summoned an army of gods. Warlord Krex made a decision that no Grimm leader had ever made before. "All remaining ships, retreat," he commanded. "Full speed, maximum acceleration. Get us out of this system." But even retreat was denied to them. Human ships were faster, their engines more advanced. The destroyer squadrons hunted down fleeing Grimm vessels with ruthless efficiency. The fighter wings pursued enemy craft that tried to escape, destroying them in the dark. Spaces between planets. "Sir," Brutus reported, his voice hollow with defeat, "they're hunting down our escape pods. They're making sure none of us survive to warn others." Krex felt true despair for the first time in his violent life. The mighty Grimm horde terror of the galaxy was being exterminated by creatures they had never even heard of before today. Captain Rex broadcast on all frequencies, his voice reaching every surviving Grimm ship. "This is Captain Rex of the Terran fleet. Switch to live ammunition. No more practice rounds." Across the human fleet, weapon systems that had been operating at reduced power suddenly came fully online. The destruction became even more complete. If such a thing was possible, Warlord Krex's flagship shuddered under multiple impacts. His bridge erupted in sparks and smoke as system after system failed. Through the chaos, he managed one final transmission. "What are these creatures?" He screamed into the communication system. "What kind of world breeds such monsters?" The question echoed through space as his ship exploded, taking with it the last organized resistance of the Grimm horde in less than 3 hours. A force that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years had been completely annihilated. The Kytherian system was quiet for the first time in a week. Where once the Grimm horde had cast shadows across entire worlds, now only scattered debris drifted through space. The silence was profound, broken only by the gentle hum of human ships. Maintaining patrol patterns, Admiral Kane stood on the observation deck of his flagship, looking out at the aftermath of the battle. Wreckage from 400 Grimm vessels created a metallic asteroid field that would remain for decades as a monument to the day the galaxy learned what happened when predators met apex predators. "Final casualty report, sir," Commander Hayes announced as he approached with a tablet in hand. Kane accepted the report and read it twice, hardly believing the numbers. 0 human ships lost. 12 minor injuries from equipment malfunctions. No combat casualties. Yes, sir. The medical bay reports most injuries were from crew members who celebrated too hard after the battle, Hayes said with a slight smile. Kane shook his head in amazement. The largest space battle in human history had resulted in the complete annihilation of the enemy without a single human death. It spoke to the overwhelming superiority of human military doctrine and the discipline of their forces on Kythera Prime. Ambassador Veltar emerged from the underground shelters for the first time in a week. The sky above her homeworld was clear of enemy ships. Sunlight, which had been blocked by Grimm vessels, now shone on the crystal spires of her capital city. Millions of Kytherians filled the streets, looking up at the sky in wonder and gratitude. Children who had hidden in terror now played in the open air. Elders who had expected to die in darkness now wept with joy as they felt natural warmth on their skin. Tech Specialist Noru, Veltar called to her aid. Prepare a shuttle. I must meet with Admiral Kane personally. The Coalition owes these humans a debt that can never be repaid. 2 hours later, Veltar's small diplomatic shuttle approached the human flagship Sovereign. The massive vessel dwarfed her tiny craft, its hull scarred from countless battles across the galaxy. Weapon ports that could destroy cities remained, politely closed, showing the restraint of a species that possessed ultimate power but chose to use it wisely. Admiral Kane waited in the shuttle bay as Veltar's craft touched down. He had changed from his battle uniform into formal diplomatic attire, showing respect for the meeting. As the Catherian ambassador stepped out of her shuttle, Kane was struck by how small and peaceful she appeared compared to the warriors his species typically encountered. Ambassador Veltar, Kane said, offering a slight bow. I am Admiral Kane. On behalf of humanity, I offer our condolences for your losses and our commitment to your future security. Veltar looked up at the tall human, seeing kindness in his scarred features. Admiral Kane, words cannot express our gratitude. You saved not just our worlds, but our entire civilization. We are prepared to offer you anything within our power. As payment for this service, Kane shook his head gently. Ambassador, there is no payment required. Protecting innocent life is not a transaction for us. It is simply what we do. The statement left Veltar speechless. In her experience, military intervention always came with a price. Territory, resources, political concessions. But the humans asked for nothing except the knowledge that people were safe. I don't understand, she said quietly. Why would your people travel thousands of light years to fight our battles? What do you gain from this? Kane was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Ambassador, my species comes from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We survived by protecting each other, by standing together against threats that would destroy us individually. When we reached the stars, we brought that instinct with us. He gestured toward the viewport where Catherian ships were beginning to emerge from hiding places throughout the system. Your people called for help, and every human who heard that call felt a duty to respond. Not because we wanted something in return, but because it is our nature to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. Veltar felt tears forming in her large eyes. You truly ask for nothing? No territory, no trade agreements? No political concessions? Nothing, Kane confirmed. Your freedom and safety are payment enough for us. As their conversation continued, reports were arriving from across the galaxy. The destruction of the Grim Horde had sent shockwaves through every spacefaring civilization. A threat that had terrorized the known universe for centuries had been eliminated in a single afternoon by a species most had never heard of on the bridge of his flagship. Kane received a transmission from Commander Reese of the Ghost Fleet. The mysterious officer's ship remained cloaked, invisible to all sensors. Admiral, Reese reported, long-range intelligence indicates 17 different species have sent urgent diplomatic messages requesting human protection. Word of our capabilities has spread faster than our ships could travel. Kane nodded. It was inevitable. Fear traveled at the speed of thought, and every predator species in the galaxy now understood they were no longer at the top of the food chain. What are your recommendations, Commander? Kane asked. Establish patrol routes, Reese replied. Make it clear that human protection is available to any peaceful species that requests it. The age of galactic bullies is over if we choose to end it. Captain Elena's destroyer squadron was already implementing that strategy. Her ships had taken positions throughout the Catherian system, their sensors constantly watching for any sign of new threats. Her crews understood they were no longer just visitors but guardians of an entire civilization. Ma'am, Lieutenant Grant reported from the tactical station, we're detecting several unknown contacts at the system's edge. They appear to be observing us from a safe distance. Elena studied the sensor readings, probably other species checking. To see if the rumors are true, let them watch. Maybe they'll spread the word that innocent civilizations now have protection. On New Geneva, the human industrial worlds had already begun converting their emergency military production to a more sustainable pace. But instead of returning to civilian goods, the factories continued producing weapons and ships. The galaxy had seen what humans could do when motivated, and demand for their protection was growing. General Vance on Mars received requests from a dozen different species, asking for human military advisors. Peaceful civilizations wanted to learn how to defend themselves using human tactics and discipline. Colonel Murphy, Vance said to his aide, prepare training programs for alien military personnel. If they want to learn how to fight like humans, we'll teach them. But make sure they understand that the goal is protection, not conquest. Ambassador Veltar spent 3 days aboard the human flagship, learning about the species that had saved her people. She discovered that humans had no interest in expansion or empire building. Their entire military philosophy was based on protection and defense. Admiral, she said as her visit came to an end, I came here expecting to negotiate with conquerors. Instead, I found guardians. My people will remember this debt for all time. Kane walked her to the shuttle bay for her departure. Ambassador, if any threat ever again menaces your worlds, you need only call. Humanity will answer. As Veltar's shuttle departed, she looked back at the human fleet through her viewport. Ships that could destroy planets were arranging themselves into protective formations around Cytherian space. Warriors who could conquer galaxies were choosing instead to serve as shields for the innocent. Her final log entry, transmitted to Coalition archives, would become one of the most important documents in galactic history. Personal log, Ambassador Veltar, Day 14 of the human intervention. I thought I was summoning saviors. I didn't realize I was introducing the galaxy to its new guardians. The Deathworlders didn't just answer our call for aid. They rewrote the rules of galactic civilization, and perhaps that's exactly what the universe needed. Across the galaxy, predator species were learning a new emotion, fear. But peaceful civilizations were discovering something they had never known before, the security that came from having protectors who asked for nothing in return, except the knowledge that good people could sleep safely at night. The age of the Deathworlders had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The exploration vessel Tranquil Dawn drifted silently through the void, its sleek hull reflecting the distant stars. Commander Velox stood on the bridge, his pale blue skin shimmering under the soft lighting. The Vithani had been exploring space for over 3,000 years, and in all that time, they had never encountered a species they could not understand. Commander, called Science Officer Kira from her station. Her large eyes focused on the data streams flowing across her screen. We're detecting radio signals from the third planet in this system. They appear to be artificial in origin. Velox approached her station with measured steps. The Vithani were known throughout the galaxy for their patience and diplomatic skills. They had successfully contacted 17 different species, each time bringing them into the peaceful fold of the collective. Show me, he said, his voice carrying the calm authority that had made him one of the most respected diplomats in Vithani. Space. The screen displayed a small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. It looked peaceful from this distance, with swirling white clouds and vast blue oceans. Nothing about it suggested the nightmare that awaited them. The signals are quite primitive, Kira continued, adjusting her instruments. Basic radio transmissions, some television broadcasts, and what appears to be early digital communications. The species seems to be in the early stages of their technological development. Communications specialist next looked up from his console, his antenna-like appendages twitching with excitement. Commander, this could be perfect. A young species just discovering technology, they would be ideal candidates for joining the collective. Cultural analyst Tev nodded in agreement. From what I can observe, they appear to be a single-world species. No signs of space travel beyond primitive satellites. They would greatly benefit from our guidance. Commander Velox smiled, an expression that had reassured countless alien species over the centuries. Very well. Prepare the standard first contact protocol. We shall welcome another species into the light of galactic civilization. The crew of the Tranquil Dawn had performed this routine many times before. They would approach peacefully, establish communication, and gradually introduced the primitive species to the wonders of the galactic community. It was a process that usually took months or even years, but the results were always worth the patience. Next, prepare the universal greeting message, Velox ordered. Use the standard template. Emphasize our peaceful intentions and our desire for cultural exchange. Nex's fingers danced across his console, crafting the message that had opened diplomatic relations with dozens of species. Message prepared, Commander. Shall I transmit? Send it. The message traveled through space toward the small blue planet. It contained the standard greeting used by the Vathany Collective for over 2 millennia. Greetings, inhabitants of the third planet. We are the Vathany Collective, seekers of peace and knowledge. We wish to establish diplomatic relations and welcome you to the galactic community. Velox settled into his command chair, expecting to wait the usual several days or weeks for a response. Most species needed time to process the shock of learning they were not alone in the universe. The response came in less than 4 hours. This is Earth Defense Command, a harsh voice crackled through the communication system. State your intentions and current location immediately. The bridge fell silent. In all their years of exploration, the Vathany had never received such a direct and aggressive response to their peaceful overture. Did they just demand our location? Nex asked, his voice uncertain. Perhaps it's a translation error, Tev suggested, quickly checking the linguistic analysis. Their language is quite complex, with many subtle meanings. Maybe they're simply asking for clarification. Commander Velox frowned. The tone of the response troubled him, but he had dealt with suspicious species before. Respond with our standard peaceful declaration. Include our current position and emphasize our diplomatic mission. The second message was carefully crafted to address any possible misunderstanding. It explained that the Vathany were peaceful explorers, that their ship carried no weapons, and that they sought only friendship and cultural exchange. The response came even faster this time. You have 12 hours to withdraw from our system before we consider your presence a hostile act. The bridge erupted in confused chatter. Science Officer Kira checked her instruments twice, convinced there must be an error. Commander, they're treating us as if we're invaders? This doesn't match any first contact scenario in our database. 12 hours, Nex repeated, his voice shaking. Commander, no species has ever given us an ultimatum during first contact. They don't even know who we are. Cultural analyst Tev was frantically analyzing the transmissions. The language pattern suggests this is some kind of military organization. But that's impossible. We haven't detected any signs of space-based military capability. Commander Velox stood up, pacing the bridge as he considered their options. In 3,000 years of exploration, the Vathany had encountered every type of species imaginable. Peaceful farmers, warrior cultures, isolated civilizations, and advanced technological societies. But none had ever responded to peaceful contact with immediate threats. Perhaps they're simply afraid, he said finally. A primitive species suddenly learning they're not alone in the universe, fear often manifests as aggression. But 12 hours, Commander, Nex protested. That's not fear, that's a military response time. Impossible, Velox replied firmly. Our sensors show no signs of advanced military technology. They're barely capable of leaving their own atmosphere. He made a decision that would haunt him. For the rest of his life, we will remain in position. Continue with standard protocol. Send them information about our peaceful mission and the benefits of joining the collective. Once they understand what we're offering, they'll realize there's nothing to fear. The third message was even more carefully crafted. It included detailed information about the Vathany Collective, the peaceful alliance of worlds they had built, and the technological and cultural benefits of membership. It emphasized that they had successfully contacted 17 other species, all of whom had joined willingly. The response was immediate and terrifying. Warning acknowledged and disregarded. You have 11 hours and 37 minutes to withdraw. Earth Defense Command has been notified of your presence. Fleet response is being prepared. Fleet response? Kira whispered. But they don't have a fleet. We've scanned the entire system. Commander, Tev said urgently, I'm detecting increased communications traffic from the planet. Multiple transmission sources, all using military-grade encryption. Nex looked up from his console, his face pale. Sir, they're not just threatening us. They're organizing something. The communication patterns suggest coordinated military activity. For the first time in his long career, Commander Velox felt a chill of genuine fear. These humans were not responding like any species the Vithani had ever encountered. They weren't asking questions about galactic civilization. They weren't expressing wonder at the existence of other life. They were treating first contact as an act of war. Maintain position, he ordered, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Continue monitoring their communications. There must be a logical explanation for this behavior. As the hours passed, the activity from the planet below increased. The humans were definitely organizing something, but the Vithani couldn't determine what. Their technology was too primitive to pose a threat to an advanced starship, yet their behavior suggested they believed they could enforce their ultimatum. 10 hours remaining, Nex announced quietly. Commander Velox stared at the peaceful blue planet on the screen. Somewhere down there, a species was preparing to do something that should have been impossible. The Vithani had superior technology, advanced shields, and faster-than-light travel. What could a primitive species possibly do to threaten them? He was about to find out why the rest of the galaxy feared Deathworlders. Science Officer Kira bent over her instruments, her hands trembling as she analyzed the data streaming from the planet below. What she was seeing couldn't be real. The readings had to be wrong. Commander, she called out, her voice barely above. A whisper, you need to see this. Commander Velox approached her station, noting the fear in her large eyes. In all their years serving together, he had never seen Kira look so disturbed. The planet, she began, then stopped, checking her readings. Again. Commander, the surface gravity is 3 times what most species can survive. The atmospheric pressure would crush a Vithani in seconds. That's impossible, Velox replied. We received organized communications from the surface. No species can evolve intelligence under such conditions. Kira shook her head, bringing up more data on her screen. The atmospheric composition is equally deadly. 21% oxygen, which is toxic to most known life forms. The gas would literally burn the lungs of 80% of Galactic species. Cultural analyst Tev looked up from his console, his face pale. Commander, I've been analyzing their entertainment transmissions. The content is disturbing. They create fictional scenarios involving mass violence, planetary destruction, and survival in impossible conditions. Show me, Velox ordered, the main screen filled with images captured from human broadcasts. Movies showing cities being destroyed, people fighting for survival in harsh environments and scenarios that would give most civilized species nightmares. They watch this for pleasure, Tev said quietly. Violence and death are forms of entertainment for them. Communications specialist Nex suddenly straightened at his station. Commander, I'm intercepting military communications from the planet. They're discussing something called defensive protocols and threat assessment. What kind of threat assessment? Velox asked. That's what worries me, sir. They're assessing us as a threat. They're analyzing our ship's capabilities, our position, and our potential weaknesses. Science Officer Kira brought up new data, her voice growing more frightened with each revelation. Commander, the planet's weather systems are beyond anything in our database. They regularly experience storms with wind speeds that could tear apart most structures. Temperature variations that would extinct entire populations. How do they survive? Velox asked. That's just it, sir. They don't just survive, they thrive. I'm detecting massive population centers in areas that should be uninhabitable. They've built cities in regions with regular natural disasters. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. The Vithani had contacted a species that lived on a world that would kill most galactic citizens within minutes. There's more, Kira continued, her voice shaking. I'm detecting energy signatures throughout the system. They're not just on the one planet. They've spread to multiple worlds, including some that register as Class 8 and 9 Deathworlds. Impossible. Velox breathed. No species colonizes Deathworlds by choice. These do, Tev said grimly. I've been analyzing their historical broadcasts. They've been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. Constant conflict, competition for resources, survival against impossible odds. Nex looked up from his communications console, his antenna-like appendages twitching with fear. Commander, the military communications are increasing. They're not just talking about defending against us. They're discussing offensive capabilities. Offensive capabilities? Velox asked, what kind of offensive capabilities? I'm not sure, sir. The terminology is unfamiliar. They're discussing something called rapid response deployment and force projection. But, sir, here's what really worries me. They're not just talking about this system. They're discussing assets in other star systems. The revelation hit the bridge like a physical blow. These humans weren't just a single-world species. They had spread across multiple star systems, colonizing worlds that would kill most galactic species. Science Officer Kira was now openly frightened. Commander, I've been analyzing their development timeline. They went from primitive radio to space travel in less than a century. Most species take 10 times that long. Their technological development is accelerating, Tev added. They're not following normal patterns of gradual advancement. They're jumping ahead in massive leaps. Why? Velox asked. What drives such rapid development? Competition, Tev replied. They're constantly trying to outdo each other. Their entire civilization is built on conflict and competition. They don't just adapt to challenges, they create challenges to adapt to. Communications specialist Nex suddenly went rigid at his station. Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching our position. Multiple sources moving at incredible speeds. From where? Velox demanded. I don't know, sir. They just appeared on sensors. Whatever they are, they're big, they're fast, and they're heading directly for us. Science Officer Kira was frantically working at her console. Commander, the energy signatures don't match anything in our database. The propulsion systems are completely unknown to us. How is that possible? Velox asked. We've studied spacefaring technology for 3,000 years. Because they're not using any known form of propulsion, Kira replied. They're doing something to space itself. They're not traveling through space. They're manipulating it. The implications were staggering. The humans had developed technology that the Vathani couldn't even understand, let alone counter. Time to contact? Velox asked. At current speeds, less than 2 hours, Nex replied. But sir, they're not following normal approach vectors. They're coming from multiple directions simultaneously. Cultural analyst Tev was studying the intercepted communications with growing alarm. Commander, they're not just sending one ship. From what I can understand, they're sending an entire fleet. A fleet? Velox echoed. But they don't have a fleet? Our initial scans showed no signs of space-based military assets, because they weren't in this system, Tev explained. They were spread across multiple star systems, ready to respond to threats wherever they appeared. The truth was becoming clear, and it was more terrifying than anything the Vathani had ever encountered. The humans weren't just a primitive species taking their first steps into space. They were a spacefaring civilization that had spread across multiple star systems, colonizing Deathworlds and building a military infrastructure that spanned light years. Commander, Nex said quietly, they knew we were coming before we even sent our first message. What do you mean? The communications patterns. They were already mobilizing before we made contact. They detected our presence in the system and immediately began preparing for what they assumed would be an invasion. Science Officer Kira was staring at her instruments in disbelief. Commander, I'm detecting weapon signatures on the approaching vessels. Energy weapons, kinetic weapons, and several types one can't identify. Weapons? Velox asked weakly. But we told them we were peaceful. They don't believe us. Tev said grimly. To them, any unknown ship in their territory is a potential threat. They're not taking any chances. The reality of their situation was becoming clear. The Vithani had stumbled into the territory of a species that had turned survival into an art form. They had contacted Deathworlders and Deathworlders didn't. Negotiate with potential threats. What do we do? Kira asked. Commander Velox stared at the approaching energy signatures on the screen. Everything he knew about diplomacy, everything he had learned in 3,000 years of peaceful contact, was useless. These humans operated by rules that no civilized species would understand. We wait, he said finally. And we hope they're more civilized than their planet suggests. But deep down, he knew that hope was futile. The humans were coming, and they were coming with the full force of the species that had learned to survive in hell. The first sign of the approaching fleet was a distortion in space itself. Science Officer Kira watched in horror as reality seemed to bend and twist on her sensors. Then, without warning, massive shapes began materializing from the void. By the ancestors, she whispered, her voice barely audible on the bridge of the Tranquil Dawn. The lead vessel was unlike anything in the Vithani database. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of their exploration ship, with angular lines that spoke of function over form. Its hull was dark gray, almost black, and covered with structures that could only be weapon systems. Commander, communications. Specialist Nex called out, his voice shaking. They're hailing us. Put it through, Commander Velox ordered. Though his usual confident tone was gone, the viewscreen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the human vessel. The being that appeared was tall and lean, with pale skin and dark hair. His eyes were cold and calculating, and when he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Carter of the United Earthship Retribution. You were given clear instructions to withdraw from this system. You have violated the sovereignty of human space. Commander Velox stepped forward, trying to maintain his diplomatic composure. Admiral Carter, I am Commander Velox of the Vithani Collective. We are peaceful explorers seeking to establish diplomatic relations. Peaceful explorers, Admiral. Carter repeated, his tone suggesting he found the words amusing. Your ship has been scanning our defensive installations for the past 6 hours. That constitutes an act of espionage. We were conducting standard scientific observations, Velox protested. It is our normal procedure when studying a new species. Your normal procedure involves gathering intelligence on military targets. Admiral Carter replied, We've analyzed your scanning patterns. You've mapped our communication networks, identified our population centers, and cataloged our defensive capabilities. Science Officer Kira felt her stomach drop. What the humans called espionage was simply standard first contact protocol for the Vithani. They always studied new species thoroughly before making contact. But to a military mind, their peaceful scientific curiosity looked like preparation for invasion. Admiral, Velox tried again, there has been a misunderstanding. We mean no harm. To your species, misunderstanding, Admiral Carter echoed. Tell me, Commander, how many other species have you contacted using these same methods? 17, Velox replied proudly, all of whom have joined our peaceful alliance. The expression on Admiral Carter's face grew darker. 17 species, all contacted by ships gathering intelligence on their military capabilities. All now part of your collective. The implications of his words hit the Vithani bridge crew like a physical blow. To the humans, the Vithani collective didn't look like a peaceful alliance. It looked like a conquest fleet that had successfully subjugated 17 different species. You don't understand, Velox said desperately. We've never conquered anyone. We offer friendship, technology, protection. Protection from what? Admiral, Carter asked. From species like yourselves? Before Velox could answer, another voice joined the communication. Admiral, this is Colonel Hayes aboard the Vengeance. We're detecting quantum signatures consistent with stealth technology. They've been hiding their true capabilities. Commander Velox felt the situation spiraling out of control. The Tranquil Dawn's energy-efficient systems were designed to minimize their impact on local space. But to human sensors, accustomed to detecting hidden threats, it looked like deliberate concealment. Stealth technology, Admiral Carter mused. Very interesting. A peaceful exploration vessel equipped with military-grade concealment systems. It's not military technology, Science Officer Kira protested. It's environmental protection. We design our ships to minimize disruption to local ecosystems. Environmental protection, Colonel Hayes said from his ship, or the perfect cover for reconnaissance operations. The humans were interpreting every aspect of Vathany technology through the lens of potential threat. Their peaceful designs were seen as deception. Their scientific curiosity was viewed as intelligence gathering. Their diplomatic mission was perceived as the prelude to invasion. Admiral, Velox said, trying one last time to establish communication. We have detailed records of all our peaceful contacts. We can provide proof of our intentions. I'm sure you can, Admiral Carter replied. Just as I'm sure those records will show exactly what you want us to see. The view screen split, showing Admiral Carter on one side and Colonel Hayes on the other. Both humans looked grim and determined. Here's what we know, Admiral Carter began. An unknown vessel with advanced technology appeared in our system. It immediately began scanning our defenses and population centers. When challenged, it refused to withdraw. When given a direct order, it ignored our authority. The vessel is equipped with stealth technology and weapons we can't identify, Colonel Hayes added. It represents a clear and present danger to human space. We have no weapons, Velox protested. Your engines are weapons, Admiral Carter replied. Any ship capable of faster-than-light travel can be turned into a kinetic weapon. Your scanning systems are weapons. Your communication array is a weapon. Every system on your ship can be used against us. The human logic was terrifying in its simplicity. They didn't see technology as tools for exploration or communication. They saw everything as a potential weapon that could be turned against them. You have 30 seconds to power down all systems and prepare for boarding, Admiral Carter announced. Compliance is not optional. And if we refuse? Velox asked. Then you'll discover why we're called Deathworlders, Colonel Hayes replied. The threat was delivered without emotion, without anger, without any of the passion that usually accompanied violence. It was simply a statement of fact. The humans would destroy them as casually as they would swat an insect. Powering down, Velox said quietly. As the Tranquil Dawn systems shut down one by one, Science Officer Kira watched the human fleet on her fading sensors. There weren't just two ships. There were dozens, all materializing from the void with the same impossible technology that bent space itself. Commander, she whispered, how did they get so many ships here so quickly? They were already here, Velox replied, the truth finally dawning on him. They've been watching us since we entered the system. Everything we've done, every scan we've made, every communication we've sent, they've been analyzing it all. Communications specialist next looked up from his darkening console. Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. They're not just ships, they're building something. Building what? Velox asked. I don't know, sir. But it's big and it's being constructed at incredible speed. The humans weren't just responding to a threat. They were creating permanent solutions to prevent future problems. They were turning the Vathany's presence into an opportunity to strengthen their defenses. Boarding party approaching, Admiral Carter announced. Do not resist. Any aggressive action will be met with overwhelming force. Through the viewport they could see the human boarding craft approaching. It was sleek and predatory, moving with the same purposeful grace as a hunting animal. Commander, Tev said quietly, I don't think they're planning to let us go. What? Do you mean? Think about it from their perspective. We're an unknown species with advanced technology and connections to 17 other worlds. We represent a potential threat to their entire civilization. The boarding craft attached to their hull with a soft thud. Whatever came next, Commander Velox knew their mission of peaceful contact had failed catastrophically. The humans were coming aboard, and they were bringing with them the cold logic of a species that had learned to survive by eliminating threats. Before they could fully manifest, the age of peaceful exploration was over. The Deathworlders had been contacted, and they were responding with the full force of their terrifying efficiency. The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss, and the human boarding party entered the tranquil dawn. The first thing that struck the Vithani crew was the sheer size of the humans. They were tall, much taller than any species the Vithani had encountered, and their bodies moved with a fluid grace that spoke of predators rather than civilized beings. The lead human wore what they called power armor, a suit that looked more like a walking tank than environmental protection. The being inside identified himself as Major Torres, and his voice carried the same cold authority as Admiral Carter. "Crew of the Tranquil Dawn," he announced, "you are now under the protection of the United Earth Defense Force for your safety. And ours, you will comply with all instructions." Commander Velox stepped forward, still trying to maintain some semblance of diplomatic protocol. "Major Torres, I am Commander Velox. I formally request that we be allowed to contact the Vithani Collective to inform them of our situation." "Request denied," Major Torres replied without hesitation. "All communications are suspended until security clearance is established." The Major's team moved through the ship with frightening efficiency. They weren't just searching for weapons or threats. They were cataloging everything, analyzing every piece of technology, mapping every system. "Interesting design," one of the humans commented, examining the bridge controls. "Non-standard layout, but efficient. Perfect for long-range reconnaissance." Science Officer Kira tried to explain that the bridge was designed for scientific observation, not military operations, but the human just nodded and continued his analysis. "Everything is a weapon to them," she whispered to communications specialist next. "They can't see anything without thinking about how it could be used against them." Major Torres approached Commander Velox, his helmet retracting to reveal a face that was both human and somehow alien. His eyes were calculating, studying Velox like a scientist examining a specimen. "Commander," he said, "your species has contacted 17 others. What was their initial response to your presence?" "They were cautious at first," Velox replied. "Most species are when they first learn they're not alone in the universe. But once they understood our peaceful intentions, they welcomed us." "How long did this process take?" "It varies. Some species required months of careful diplomacy. Others were more receptive. The longest took almost 2 years to fully integrate into the collective." Major Torres exchanged glances with his team. 2 years. "And during this time, your ships remained in their systems, studying their capabilities?" "We studied their cultures, their technologies, their needs," Velox explained. "We wanted to understand how best to help them." "You studied their defenses," Major Torres corrected. "You mapped their weaknesses. You identified their strategic resources." "No," Velox protested. "We're not a military organization. We're explorers. Diplomats, scientists, with ships equipped with stealth technology, advanced sensors, and faster-than-light capability," Major Torres replied. "The perfect tools for reconnaissance and first-strike capability." The conversation was interrupted by another human, Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been questioning cultural analyst Tev. "Major, you need to hear this. They've been studying our entertainment broadcasts." "What did you find?" Major Torres asked. "They're analyzing our fictional media for psychological weaknesses," Rodriguez replied. "They've cataloged our fear responses, our behavioral patterns, our cultural values." "That's not true," Tev protested. "We study entertainment to understand how different species think, how they process information, what they value." "You study it to find ways to manipulate us," Rodriguez corrected. "Classic psychological warfare preparation." The humans were taking every aspect of standard Vithani First Contact Protocol and interpreting it through the lens of potential military threat. Their peaceful scientific curiosity was being viewed as preparation for conquest. "Your species has developed something," we call xenopsychology, Rodriguez continued. The study of alien minds for the purpose of psychological manipulation, very advanced, very dangerous. We call it cultural anthropology, Tev said weakly. We study cultures to understand them better, to exploit them better, Rodriguez replied. To find the pressure points that will make them surrender without a fight. Major Torres was examining the ship's technical specifications on a portable device. Power output is impressive. Defensive capabilities are minimal, but that's probably deliberate. Makes you look harmless while you gather intelligence. We are harmless, Science Officer Kira said. We've never harmed anyone. No, Major Torres agreed. You just study them until you understand exactly how to destroy them, then you send in the real military forces. The logic was inescapable from the human perspective. The Vithani had appeared in their system with advanced technology, refused to withdraw when ordered, and spent hours studying their defenses. The fact that they claimed to be peaceful only made them more dangerous, not less. Major, one of the human technicians called out, "You need to see this." Their computer systems contained detailed files on 17 different species. Military capabilities, resource distribution, population centers, everything. You mean cultural databases, Commander? Velox said desperately. Information we use to help integrate new species into the collective. Information you'd need to occupy and control them, Major Torres replied. Population centers to target, resources to exploit, military forces to neutralize. The humans were systematically reinterpreting every aspect of the Thani civilization. Their peaceful collective was viewed as a conquest fleet. Their diplomatic records were seen as intelligence reports. Their offers of friendship were perceived as demands for surrender. How do your ships communicate with each other? Major Torres asked. We use quantum entanglement arrays, Nex replied. They allow instantaneous communication across any distance. Perfect. For coordinating a multi-system invasion, Major Torres noted, real-time tactical communication without any possibility of interception. We use it to share scientific data and cultural information, Nex protested. Same technology, different application, Major Torres replied. The ability to coordinate forces across multiple star systems simultaneously. Very effective for military operations. Lieutenant Rodriguez was studying the crew's personal belongings with the same cold analysis. Major, their personal effects include detailed studies of human psychology and behavior. They've been preparing for this contact for a long time. Those are preliminary cultural studies, cultural analyst Tev explained. We always try to understand a species before making contact. You've been spying on us, Rodriguez accused. Gathering intelligence, preparing for invasion. We monitored your broadcasts to learn your languages and customs, Tev said. It's standard procedure. Standard procedure for an intelligence operation, Rodriguez replied. You've been watching us, studying us, preparing to conquer us. The humans had reached a terrifying conclusion. From their perspective, the Vithani weren't peaceful explorers. They were advanced scouts for a multi-species empire that had already conquered 17 worlds. They had come to Earth not to offer friendship, but to prepare for invasion. Major, Commander Velox said, making one final attempt at diplomacy, there has been a terrible misunderstanding. We are not conquerors, we are not spies. We are simply people who believe that all species can benefit from peaceful cooperation. Major Torres looked at him with something that might have been pity. Commander, in our experience, the most dangerous enemies are the ones who believe they're helping us. You've convinced yourself that conquest is liberation, that submission is friendship, that resistance is ignorance. That's not what we believe, Velox protested. No, Major Torres agreed. It's what you've been taught to believe. It's what makes you so effective. You genuinely think you're doing good while you destroy entire civilizations. The humans had created a logical framework that made the Vathani's peaceful intentions irrelevant. Whether they meant to conquer or not, they had the capability to do so. They had the technology, the organization, and the strategic position to threaten all of human space. What happens now? Commander Velox asked. Now, Major Torres replied, you're going to help us understand exactly what we're dealing with. You're going to tell us about these 17 species you've contacted. You're going to explain how your collective operates. And you're going to help us prepare for what's coming. Nothing is coming, Vilok said. We're explorers, not conquerors. Maybe, Major Torres replied. But we're not going to bet the survival of our species on your good intentions. We're going to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. The Deathworlders had been contacted, and they were responding with the cold logic of a species that had learned to survive by assuming the worst about everyone they met. The bridge of the UES Retribution was a monument to human efficiency. Every surface served a purpose, every display showed critical information, and every crew member moved with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Commander Vilok stood in the center of it all, surrounded by beings who had turned warfare into an art form. Impressive, isn't it? Admiral Carter said, gesturing to the massive U-screen that dominated the bridge. Defense Platform 7, we built it in the last 4 hours. Vilok stared at the structure displayed on the screen. It was enormous, bristling with weapon systems and defensive arrays. The idea that any species could construct such a facility in mere hours was beyond comprehension. 4 hours, he repeated weakly. That's impossible. Standard protocol when unknown vessels refuse to withdraw, Admiral Carter explained. We don't just respond to threats. We create permanent solutions to prevent future problems. The human logic was as terrifying as it was efficient. They didn't just defend against current threats. They anticipated future ones and built infrastructure to counter them before they could fully manifest. Your ship's arrival triggered Protocol 7, Admiral Carter continued. Unknown vessel with advanced technology and potential hostile intent. Response time was 3 hours and 47 minutes from initial detection to full defensive deployment. Captain Morrison from the UES Dauntless appeared on a secondary screen. Admiral, we've completed our analysis of the Vithani technology. Their communications array could theoretically coordinate a multi-system assault. Their sensors are more advanced than anything in our database. Could coordinate an assault? Admiral Carter repeated, looking at Vilok. Or is designed to coordinate an assault? It's designed for scientific research and diplomatic communication, Vilok protested. We're not a military organization. No, Admiral Carter agreed. You're something far more dangerous. You're a species that has convinced itself that conquest is kindness. The accusation hit Vilok like a physical blow. In all his years of diplomatic service, no one had ever questioned the fundamental goodness of the Vithani mission. They brought peace, technology, and prosperity to primitive worlds. They were liberators, not conquerors. Admiral, Major Torres reported from the Tranquil Dawn. We've extracted the complete database from their computer systems. Detailed information on 17 different species, including military capabilities, resource distribution, and population centers. 17 species? Admiral Carter mused. All now part of your collective. All providing resources, technology, and presumably military support to your expansion. They're our allies, Vilok said. They joined us willingly, did they? Admiral Carter asked. Or did they join you after you demonstrated that resistance was futile? The question hung in the air like a physical presence. Vilok tried to remember the details of past first contacts. Had any species actually resisted joining? The collective? Had any been given a real choice? I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Science Officer Kira reported from her position at a monitoring station. They're not just building defensive platforms. They're mobilizing their entire fleet. Not mobilizing. Admiral Carter corrected. Repositioning. We're moving assets to optimal strategic positions throughout human space. Lieutenant Rodriguez appeared on another screen, broadcasting from a secure facility. Admiral, we've completed our analysis of the Vithani's 17 allied species. 12 of them were spacefaring civilizations before contact. All of them ceased independent space operations after joining the collective. Ceased independent operations, Admiral Carter repeated. How convenient. No more competing military forces, no more independent technological development, no more resistance to collective authority. They didn't need those things anymore, Velox said desperately. We provided everything they needed. You provided everything they were allowed to have, Admiral Carter replied. Very different thing. The truth was beginning to dawn on Velox with horrifying clarity. The Vithani had never conquered anyone through military force. They had done something far more insidious. They had made conquest look like salvation. Sir, Captain Morrison reported, we've dispatched reconnaissance vessels to all 17 worlds in the Vithani database. We need to assess the scope of the threat. Reconnaissance vessels? Velox asked, alarmed. But those species are peaceful. They've done nothing to threaten you. They're part of an organization that has just demonstrated hostile intent toward human space, Admiral Carter replied. That makes them potential combatants. They don't even know we're here, Velox protested. They have no idea this contact has occurred. They will soon, Admiral Carter said grimly. We're not going to wait for them to mobilize against us. We're going to assess the threat and respond accordingly. The humans were doing exactly what they had accused the Vithani of doing. They were gathering intelligence, assessing capabilities, and preparing for a potential conflict. The difference was that they were doing it openly, without pretense of peaceful intent. Admiral, Major Torres reported, the Vithani crew is requesting permission to contact their homeworld. They want to explain the situation and prevent any misunderstandings. Request denied, Admiral Carter replied. We're not giving them the opportunity to coordinate a response. But there won't be a response, Velox said. We're not a military threat. Maybe not, Admiral Carter agreed. But we're not going to bet the survival of our species on your word. We're going to verify everything independently. The view screen changed to show a tactical display of human space. Red icons marked the positions of human vessels, while blue icons showed the locations of the reconnaissance ships heading toward Vithani space. 18 scout ships, Admiral Carter noted. 1 for each world in your collective, plus 1 for your homeworld. They'll gather intelligence, assess capabilities, and report back. You're starting a war, Velox said, horrified. No, Admiral Carter replied. We're preventing one. By the time our scouts reach your territory, we'll know exactly what we're dealing with. If you're truly peaceful, there will be no problem. If you're not, we'll be ready. The human approach was methodical and thorough. They weren't taking any chances, weren't making any assumptions, weren't trusting anyone's word. They were treating the Vithani contact as a potential prelude to war and responding accordingly. Sir, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, we've identified the optimal strategic response to a multi-system threat. Recommend immediate deployment of Fleet Command Protocol. What's Fleet Command Protocol? Velox asked. Something we hoped we'd never have to use, Admiral Carter replied. The coordinated response of all human military assets to an existential threat. The implications were staggering. The humans weren't just preparing to defend against the Vithani. They were preparing to fight an entire galactic alliance if necessary. Admiral, Captain Morrison reported, all fleet elements are reporting ready. We have assets in position throughout human space and beyond. Beyond? Velox asked. We don't just defend our territory, Admiral Carter explained. We defend the space around our territory, and the space around that space. We learned a long time ago that the best defense is to make sure threats never get close enough to matter. The humans had built a military infrastructure that spanned multiple star systems. They had anticipated the possibility of multi-system conflict and prepared for it in advance. The Vithani contact hadn't triggered their military response. It had simply activated systems that were already in place. You came looking for a primitive species to add to your collection, Admiral Carter said. Instead, you found a species that has spent centuries preparing for exactly this type of contact. We're not collectors, Velox protested. We're diplomats. You're both, Admiral Carter replied. And that's what makes you so dangerous. You genuinely believe you're helping the species you conquer. You've convinced yourself that resistance is ignorance and submission is enlightenment. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place. The humans had concluded that the Vathani weren't evil conquerors. They were something far more dangerous, well-intentioned conquerors who believed they were doing good. What happens now? Velox asked. Now we wait, Admiral Carter replied. We wait for our scouts to report back. We wait to see how your collective responds to our presence. We wait to see if this ends in diplomacy or war. And if it's war? Admiral. Carter's expression was grim. Then you'll discover why we're called Deathworlders, and why the galaxy learned to fear us long before we learned to fear it. The bridge fell silent except for the steady hum of the ship's systems. Commander Velox stood surrounded by beings who had turned paranoia into a survival strategy and warfare into a science. He had come to offer them membership in a peaceful collective. Instead, he had introduced them to an entire galactic community that they now saw as a potential threat. The age of peaceful expansion was over. The Deathworlders had been contacted, and they were responding with the full force of a species that had learned to survive by assuming the worst about everyone they met. The galaxy would never be the same.